So the reason why we're having this is because we found a disease called Huang Long Bing or citrus greening disease in the neighborhood, in the Corona neighborhood. Since we have found it in the area, we know the reason why we're doing it is because the citrus greening disease is a disease that kills a tree. It makes the fruit bitter, lopsided, and aborts the seeds. There is no cure for this disease. So since there is no cure, it makes it a serious threat. It's primarily transmitted basically through the Asian citrus psyllid or the ACP, but it can also be transmitted through grafting of infected plant material. The Asian citrus psyllid, it feeds on fresh new growth, and it mainly it goes after citrus and citrus family relatives. The reason why it goes after the fresh new growth is because the insect has piercing, sucking mouthpieces, and the fresh new growth is a lot easier for it to pierce it and feed on it. Some of the symptoms, like I said, it has lopsided fruit with aborted seeds. So if you can kind of tell on this slide, typical fruit, it would go right down the middle, but as you see, this side's a little bit bigger than the other side. Another symptom is the asymmetrical modeling. If it was nutrient deficiency or something else, typically it would be symmetrical both sides, but asymmetrical could be numerous things. For instance, if there's an insect that feeds on the backside of the leaves, that could also damage it, but these are actually pictures of an infected tree. The blotchy model, it basically means the yellowing is uneven. Another symptom is the yellow veins. So far, we've had this disease in 4 counties, Riverside, Orange County, LA, and San Bernardino. This disease has been in the United States for a while. It first came into Southern California in 2012 in Southern California, and as such has expanded. If you suspect that you have the disease, please, and on all of our forms and all of our flyers, we do have the 1-800 number. And if you would like, it's right here at the bottom, 1-800-491-1899. But it'll be on all the other slides. So if you don't catch it this first time, just know it'll be on the next slide. So how to inspect your citrus? What to look for, these insects are really small. They're about the size of an aphid or a gnat. If you look at this slide right here, here's some ants. Here's the fresh new growth. And unless you're really trained, you're going to need a magnifying or some kind of hand lens to look for it. But the best time to look for it is when you're watering, pruning, tending the trees. When you are looking for it, pay close attention to like I said, the new growth, the flushing growth. Because that's, like I said, where they tend to all be at. These insects, the adults, they're small. Like I said, they stand about, their bodies are lifted about a 45-degree angle. If you're looking at the new growth, it kind of looks like a little thorn, or it's very easily missed unless you're actually using to it. The nymphs, they're an orange dull. They're dull orange and have red eyes. They produce waxy tubules that direct honeydew away from the bodies. The honeydew that we're talking about are these little white waxy tubules. The nymphs are slow. They don't have wings, so they won't fly around. So they do produce sooty mold. So the nymphs are basically, after it hatches from the egg, it turns into a nymph. And like the eggs are bright and yellow and almond shaped and appear in the groups on the newest, most tender underfold leaves. So when you're looking for it, when you should do it, just looking for the psyllid when it's flushing, or on a regular basis, like I said, along the new shoots. And how often? Monthly, but the psyllids are basically everywhere in Southern California. So there's a good chance that you could have it, especially since, like I said, we found a disease in this area. So what we're doing with the primary reason for this meeting is because since we did find the disease in the area, we will be conducting treatments in the area. The treatments are free of charge. When staff come by, they will all be wearing proper ID and uniforms. In order to maintain and preserve social distancing, these treatments will be conducted by appointments only, and we won't be knocking on doors in order to protect the safety of you, the residents, and the staff as well that are working. So what we do is we just ask the residents either to leave a gate unlocked, and when you call for an appointment, we have. Sorry, let me go back. So when we ask just the residents to leave the gate unlocked or open for the time frame that you have your appointment. When you call for an appointment, again, you can call our 1-800 number, the pest hotline, to schedule these appointments. But I'll go over that in a few more slides. The treatments that we're doing, we have two primary treatments. We have a foliar application, which is called Tempo. That one lasts on the tree for about 2 weeks. That is a contact insecticide, which means it targets the insects on the trees. So if you look at the bottom at this slide, and these slides, they're spraying Tempo. We also have a soil drench called Merit. That one, it takes about 2 weeks to uptake in the tree. That one is used to protect the tree. So Tempo, basically, it takes 2 weeks to get rid of any adults that are on the tree and anything that are any of the nymphs. And by the time that one wears off, the Merit will start working. After the treatment has occurred, please let the area dry for up to 4 hours before harvesting fruit or entering the area. The fruit is still safe to eat. However, we do ask you wash with soap and water before eating. There is no, as you can see, we do spray on the tree. There's no need to harvest before. Everything we use is safe. That's basically what the growers themselves use, except so what we're using, like I said, it's safe. So as far as this slide is basically showing you what we use is nothing you kind of can't get over the counter yourself. The Asian citrus the ACP treatment program uses imidacloprid and cyfluthrin. Like I said, this slide is kind of showing you a little legend is showing which products that you can buy yourself has the same active ingredient we're using. Imidacloprid is a nicotine-based insecticide. It's commonly used in like flea and tick treatments for cats and dogs. So I don't know the exact name of it, but it's the treatment where you place the drop on the back of their neck. Beta-cyfluthrin is a pyrethroid insecticide that's produced from chrysanthemum flowers. Pyrethroids are one of the most common pesticides used in the household insecticides. So like I said, this slide is basically to show everything we're using is something you can go get yourself, except what we have is a little bit better. And as like I said in the previous slide, this is free of charge, so it's not going to cost you anything. So using biocontrol, so we do have a few biocontrol methods where we use the parasitic wasps to feed on the Asian citrus psyllid. It's a useful tool that can help drive the pest. CDFA is currently mass rearing and releasing Tamarixia throughout California. This tiny wasp is being reared inside specialized greenhouses with small bug dorms. The plants inside the bug dorms are first infested with ACP, and then Tamarixia are introduced 2 weeks later. They eat and parasitize as much as they can the 2 weeks later. The offspring is collected and released into the field. This whole process takes about 6 weeks. This host is a specific predator that has been approved for release in California to drive down population of the ACP. It can only feed on ACPs and parasitize ACP nymphs. The majority of the Tamarixia wasps are released in a high-risk area such as major travel routes around HLB detection areas, the U.S.-Mexico border, and residential properties near commercial citrus. The Tamarixia is released by the CDFA staff. They they first look for citrus hosts and then release about 600 to 800 wasps per site. Since the wasps can fly, they can choose to stay or search for ACP in different sites, however they please. It's important to note that females are the only ones doing all the work. In order to produce the eggs, they must feed on the eggs or smaller ACP nymphs. Although the Tamarixia, it can parasitize larger nymphs, and once the egg hatches inside the nymph, it will complete its life cycle, and as an adult wasp will pop out the dead nymph's head. But although the Tamarixia is an effective predator for ACP, it won't eliminate it completely. It's important to know that you, the residents, know that the best way of controlling ACP on your property is through treatment. Tamarixia has been established in Southern California, but will continue to supplement. We CDFA will continue to supplement higher risk areas with ongoing releases. So, when we go out to treat, we also protect pollinators. So we are very aware. We keep of the bees in the area. So we as treatment, we follow all the necessary pesticide label and all the bee safety languages. When we're out treating, we always look for foraging bees on properties and on trees. If we see bees on the property, we won't treat the property. We'll reschedule it to come back later, either in the morning or in the evening, whenever the bees aren't active. We do everything we possibly can to make sure to minimize any environmental effect. So if they have any other questions, we can always visit the website. On the bottom right-hand side, we're cdfa.ca.gov/plant pollinators. But just know we are doing everything we can to not conduct any treatments when bees are present. So we have 3 different notifications. We have a pink notification, which is the advanced notice of insecticide treatment. The advanced notice is the initial notice that explains the process and lets you know to call the 1-800 to schedule an appointment. We are planning to send out these pink notices on Monday in the Corona area. However, if you would like us to treat on Monday, by all means, call our 1-800 number and you can schedule an appointment starting Monday. We will be out there on Monday and we will start accepting appointments as soon as tomorrow. If you decide to call tonight, please leave a message and an operator will get back to you and try and schedule you. So we typically leave the notices at least 48 hours in advance. Since this is due to COVID-19, we're notifying everybody at the same time. And once you receive the notice, please go ahead and call the number and we'll make an appointment at your earliest convenience. The green notice is the reschedule notice. So for whatever reason, we weren't able to treat your property, maybe forgot that we were going to be there and unlocked it. Either way, we leave the green notice stating why we weren't able to access your property. Like I said, whether it's lock gates, the weather, if it's too windy, if it rains, if there's bees on the property, you'll be notified in the screen notice. And again, every notice we have has the 800 number, so you can always call again and reschedule the appointment. The last notice is the post-treatment notice. This is basically your receipt kind of showing what we did on your property. It states what day, the time we were there, and it gives you a little more information on the products we actually used. Like I said, this is basically just a notification to let you know what was done on the property. You receive the yellow as soon as we're done. We will, since we're not knocking on doors, we will just basically leave this on the door for you to get the information. On all of the notices, on the bottom left-hand side, there will be a section right here that says block number. This is basically a reference number for us to get back to you and know exactly where you're at and find your property so we can treat your property. So the next few slides are geared mainly towards growers, nurseries and kind of growers. If there are any nurseries or growers, please, if you'd like to have any specific questions, please raise your hand, and we have some staff on the call that can answer your question. But for the residents, I'll just go over these, just kind of go over. So what plants are regulated? Again, we're only going after citrus plants and citrus relatives. And by citrus relatives, there are some plants that are related but don't necessarily look like citrus, such as the curry leaf. The curry leaf is related. The curry leaf is used for many dishes. You're using the leaf instead of the actual fruits. Where there is another one called the Mariah, which is used as like an ornamental shrub. So what happens is once we find an HLB site, there's a quarantine that's placed around within a 5-mile buffer from that positive tree, with the exception of fruit trees that have been commercially cleaned and packed, or fruit that is used for personal consumption. ACP and HLB host plants are basically prohibited from movement unless those areas have met the regulatory requirements. So what establishments are regulated? Let me go back. So what can you do to prevent the spread of HLB? So as a homeowner, please do not move any citrus plants, potted plants from your property. Please keep them there. If you have homegrown fruit, you can move them within the quarantine boundary as long as you remove the fruits and stems. However, it's discouraged to move them outside of the area. For instance, since you're in an HLB area, it would be recommended to keep it localized in that area if it's used for personal consumption. So what establishments are regulated? Nurseries. It's just a short one. So outdoor grown and maintained citrus nursery stocks within HLB quarantine possess a tremendous threat to the spreading HLB and cannot be sold. Only nurseries with the CDFA approved structures may sell the plants with a red HLB tag. So what that means, the reason for this is because the trees that aren't covered, they're basically a threat because they could have been infected. So unless they're within an approved CDFA structure, there's no way to tell if those haven't been infected. Green waste. Green waste should be placed in the residential backyard waste bins or taken to your local landfills or green waste recycling centers within the HLB quarantine. Green waste may only be moved out of the quarantine area if compliant with the quarantine requirements. So as stated, please, if you're gonna trim your trees, please get rid of it in your green waste bins. However, it's highly recommended that you let the leaves dry out before you send them or put them in the waste bins. And lastly, the swap meets and farmers markets. Fruit free from stems and leaves may be sold from the swap meet and farmers markets by vendors with compliance agreements. Nursery stocks may not be sold at farmers markets within the HLB quarantine. So basically, you can buy the fruit from the vendors as long as they have the compliance agreements, as long as the growers or the fruit vendors at the farmers market, as long as they have the compliance agreements, they can sell them and you can buy it from them. However, if it's in the HLB quarantine area, they cannot sell. No nursery stock can be sold. So both of these slides basically show which zone allows you the different types, I want to say movement, but the picture to the left means it's basically bulk citrus movement. So unless you're a commercial grower or packer or something to that effect, as a resident, if you have fruit and you're not within the HLB area, it's recommended that you keep your fruit local to your area. Same thing with the right picture. It's a nursery stock movement. If you're buying a tree, please don't buy a tree from any outside of the zone you're in. with the one caveat, as if you're in the HLB zone. For instance, to the left, if you, as I said it before, if you have citrus and you're within the zone, please keep it and eat the fruit and keep the fruit within the area you're at. This last slide, it's the HLB regulatory map with Corona, and since Corona, we did have HLB. Basically, citrus trees are not allowed to sell within this area unless nurseries have met certain requirements. So it basically kind of goes back to what I said on the previous slide. If you have fruit trees, if you have greenways, please, since you are inside this area, please don't move anything, any plant material outside of your area. Please get rid of it on site, and any of your green trimmings. So if there's any other questions, I'll go ahead and open this up for questions. But again, if you have any other questions, there's also the 1-800 number.
Hey, Alex, are you ready to go ahead and give the Spanish version? Why don't we go ahead and run through that?
To citrus and other potential hosts such as Mariah or orange jasmine or curry leaf, which is another host. This material is very effective against insects. It lasts in the environment for 2 weeks to about like 6 months at most. It is a common insecticide used in homeowners. It's also used for treatment of bed bugs around the beds, also used for pet quarters. And unless you are a mixer of this chemical in a confined space in a very humid condition, it's not possible that, it's very unlikely that you would suffer any kind of toxicological effect from this. This material is sprayed onto the tree, and it travels in a large droplet. It never travels more than a couple meters away from the tree. And so after it lands, after several hours, you could, after the material dries on the tree, you could pick the fruit, just wash it with soap and water, and the fruits are ready to eat. There's no problems. At the concentration that CDFA is applying this material to the trees, it is very unlikely that there will be any consequences as far as consumption of the fruit is concerned. The other material is a neonicotinoid insecticide, and it's in the product called Merit. The active ingredient in this product is the same material that is used in Advantage, which is a material that is applied to the nape or the back of the neck of the dogs and cats for flea treatment. Both of these products can be bought off the shelf from your hardware store or pet center. This material is, again, diluted to very low concentration. It is applied to the base of the tree, and it travels no more than 1 or 2 meters below the surface of the soil. It is actively taken up by the root, travels up the xylem to the most actively growing part of the tree, which is the green shoot that's just coming out. And most of it just stays inside the most rapidly growing part of the leaf, and very little, if any, travels into the blossom or the fruit. Most of the fruit that we have tested, or DPR has tested, the concentration is extremely small and mostly is non-detect in the fruit. Again, you could harvest the fruit, wash it with soap and water, and consume it as usual. There's no problems. And as I said, at the concentration that CDFA uses, at the level of concentration that they use, it is very unlikely that you would have any health-related incident associated with consumption of the fruit treated after merit. Now, cyfluthrine, the one that is sprayed onto the tree, will protect the tree immediately after spraying. However, the merit treatment that is treated onto the ground surface around the root of the tree will protect the tree for the extended period of time, for about like 6 months to a year at most, so that the CDFA folks doesn't have to continuously come back several weeks later and retreat the tree. So, and this product is also being widely used in soybeans back in Midwest, and also it is very likely that a lot of the ornamentals and plants that you buy from hardware stores gets pre-treated with this material. It is at a concentration that's much higher than what the CDFA is using. Is there any other questions concerning these two pesticides?
Yeah, so there's two follow-up questions to that. One is, what is the half-life of, let me click on it. What is the half-life of the active ingredient and inactive ingredients if not exposed to sunlight?
Well,
go ahead.
Okay, you're referring to the one that's sprayed onto the tree, the cyfluthrine. Is that correct? Or both?
Brian, this is Victoria. I think they're just asking about both active ingredients, which of course the only one that would be exposed to the sunlight is the beta-cyfluthrine.
Yes, beta-cyfluthrine. Well, this material gets very quickly photo-degraded under the sun, so it's likely to last for about like a couple of weeks if it's exposed to the sun. Now, if it ends up in little cracks and crevices, it could last a little bit longer. But it depends on the environmental condition. But it's not meant to last an extended period of time. The merit, well, it gets treated into the soil, and it stays inside the soil. So especially if you water around the base of the tree, it is very unlikely that the residents will be exposed to it. The half-life for this material could extend up to about like 6 months after a tree is treated, and it's actually taken up by the tree, and it goes up the xylem to the most active part of the plant, and it stays in the plant for several months.
Okay, and then the second follow-up question we have here is, will they kill spiders, mites, fish, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, ladybugs?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. Well, cyfluthrine is toxic, of course, to insects, and of course the merit neonicotinoid is, of course, it's toxic to insects. Most likely will kill spiders also. One thing about cyfluthrine is toxic to the fish. So if you have any koi ponds or anything in your backyard, make sure you tell the CDFA folks to cover all the ponds in sensitive areas, especially if you have any vegetable growing along the side of your citrus tree. Maybe you should inform the CDFA folks to cover those plants up that you're growing for plants grown for consumption.
Hey,
yes,
Brian, the next question might be one to share for you and Dave Kim to share. It's about, let me make sure Dave is unmuted. Hang on. Dave Kim is from DPR. Dave, you're self-muted. So the next question is, studies show that neonicotinoids are systemic, get into the entire plant tree and present at both nectar and pollen for years, and kills 100% at 1 part per billion, what the government allows, per Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, USDA scientist research. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, that depends on the plant. Now, if you have, if it's kind of like a smaller plant, it'll more quickly get into a smaller plant than a large tree like orange tree. So in orange blossoms, there was a study done by not the EPA, but UC Riverside that has conducted a study to see how much the bees are affected by the concentration of neonicotinoid in the nectar. And that study shows that the result is sort of equivocal as far as the toxicity is concerned. And US EPA has also done a field study, colony-wide field study in their US EPA study for bees, and they have shown that it doesn't really affect the colony at the colony level. So it depends on the size of the plant. It gets into the shorter plants or small plants more quickly than a large orange tree, for example. So if you have something like small ornamental flowers and blossoms you have growing in your backyard, it gets into those more quickly than and in higher concentration than you expect to find in orange blossoms. So in the concentration that you find in orange blossom, I don't think you will see that much effect on the pollinators. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and open up. Let's see if anybody else has any questions. We've been party. Let's go ahead and see if there's any other questions. Please raise your hand and we'll unmute you to ask your question. If there's anything else, I'm sorry. Just want to make sure everybody's getting an equal opportunity to have any questions answered. Any other questions? Dave, Kim, did you have anything to add? Oh, I'm sorry, I have a hand up. Hang on one second. Christine, you're self-muted. Please unmute. Go ahead, Christine.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
So these sprays, if we're spraying, because I see a lot of the green lacewings and the hoverfly, syrphid fly larvae on the orange trees. And we're going to be killing a lot of those, which I know are good general predators on the Asian citrus psyllids. So, what is the effect, the long-term effect on killing off a lot of my beneficial insects?
Well, these treatments are spot treatment just on the orange tree. So it'll affect only small portion of the population of the beneficial insect. You got to remember that these treatments are specifically for citrus trees only in most cases. If there's Mariah or if there's a curry leaf, very rarely found in residence, it gets treated. But since it's a spot treatment, the overall population, I think, will be protected. It'll only affect the population that is present on the treated plant. Now, again, it's a spot treatment of specific host plants only. Does that answer your question?
Well, I know because I am trying to, keep tanglefoot on my trees to keep the ants out, because I know it's the ants that fight off a lot of these general predators, and so I know it's important.
Yes, and
so I know it's important to have these predators.
Ants harvest honeydews from Asian citrus psyllids and other other pests like aphids. So ants are not always necessarily beneficial insects because they help these. Yes.
The ants are. I know the ants are not beneficial. I'm trying to keep them out of the trees using tanglefoot to keep them.
The application
But I know-
shouldn't affect that because they won't be necessarily spraying the trunk of the tree because that's where you put the tanglefoot, right?
Right, but the
Yeah,
purpose
so
is
they
so I
won't be
can,
spraying that.
so I can, but I want to encourage the green lacewings and the ladybugs and the syrphid flies because they predate on the Asian citrus psyllids. I know not as good as the Tamarixia radiata, but that they still do help predate a lot on that. And I see, at night when the, I see a lot of green lacewings flying around my tree at night, so I know they're there around the tree a lot.
Yeah,
So
those beneficial insects will come back as soon as the cyclotron wears off in a couple weeks. They'll come back from other areas.
But even if they're sprayed, spot sprayed, there's always drift, and that's in a small yard. That I've been working hard to keep. I do everything organically, and I'm trying to keep my beneficial insects up. So I would worry about that.
Yeah, well, the droplets are large droplets that CDFA is applying, and after it contacts the leaves, it just sort of pretty much stay there when it's first applied, and so it doesn't really travel all that much, maybe about a meter away from the tree at the most. So after the treatment and after it dries, and after a couple weeks or so after cyclotron goes away, the beneficial will come back from the other areas. It doesn't really drift all that much or volatilize cyclotron. Cyclotron is not volatile.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, I will keep trying to keep my trees as healthy as possible, though.
Right.
We appreciate that. Yeah, we want to make sure that everybody's doing everything they can to keep their trees healthy and prevent the spread of this disease. So we do appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and see if we have more questions. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to go to the other online question that I have, which is probably for Oiha. Are these pesticides lowering our immunity during this pandemic?
Your question is, are these pesticides lowering your immunity during pandemic? Now you got to understand that these pesticides are commonly used pesticides, and you could buy these at hardware stores. And most likely, if you buy it from a hardware store and apply it to your plants, you're probably being exposed to much higher concentration that you normally would be exposed to from the CDFA treatment. So I don't think so. My opinion is no, I don't think so, that it's going to affect your immunity, because things like pyrethrins, the ratio of activity towards insects is 2,000 times higher. For imidacloprid, it's about like 500 times higher than the concentration that will affect mammals or humans. So it's very unlikely that that your immune system will be affected by these insecticides. And as previously noted, these, especially imidacloprid, is used in quite a copious amount for treatment of not homegrown, but agricultural products such as soybeans. I'm sure that other pesticides, much more toxic pesticide, is used around the citrus plants by the growers than what CDFA is using. So I don't think it'll affect your immune systems.
So Brian, there's another question being asked, and that's research shows lowers immunity in bees and is in our yard.
There is a study concerning of this issue, and some of the study that has been conducted does implicate that bees' immune system could be affected by concentration of imidacloprid. But is this it's kind of, it's really kind of not really known whether that really happens. In some study it does, and in another study it doesn't seem to be doing that. But if you really think about it, neonicotinoid, it's an insecticide after all, so it does affect insects one way or the other, whether it's their immune system or not. So we're applying CDFA is applying an insecticide to control agent such as Psyllid, so some kind of a health effect towards bee is expected, or to other beneficial insects.
A follow-up comment is it also attacks bee brains.
Yes, well, that's it causes disorientation in some bees in some studies. True. Yes, that has happened. I have read some studies like that in the review literature that I've found. But recently, U.S. EPA has done a pollinator study, a colony-wide study concerning this issue, and they have few colonies throughout, I think it was Midwest, 2 or 3 of them, and they were fed pollen with concentration in the imidacloprid. And they found that US EPA colony-wide study did not affect the colony level of the bee population as much as individual bees at much higher concentration of imidacloprid that is fed through sugar solution, etc. In some of the studies. A lot of these studies are done in greenhouses, and these greenhouses studies or some of these studies are sometimes at the bees are fed at much higher concentration that they normally encounter. And you got to understand bee biology here, because bees forage about like 2-mile radius, and they don't necessarily forage in small locations. Okay, so where there's high concentration, they'll go up 2-mile radius to forage. So the concentration that is actually acquired by the bee through the treatment that CDFA is doing is much less than what you would do with these control study that these literature that you find in the literature. Could you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. That makes sense. Basically,
does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that some studies are designed in such a way that the bees are exposed or fed much higher concentrations of the insecticide than they would encounter in the environment.
Yeah. If you control the study that way, you'll get effect. You'll see much more effect more readily. And it's deliberately done that way to see what concentration would affect the individual bees and whatnot. But colony-wide, these bees spread out, especially honeybees, they spread out 2-mile radius. And it's more likely that these honeybees pick up other more toxic pesticides from other plants that they forage from than from one source that is very close by.
Okay, it looks like I have another question from Christine. I'm going to unmute you, and then you'll have to unmute yourself, Christine. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so you're talking about the bees, but what you're mostly talking about are the honeybees that have the hives. In my garden, I have mason bees, and later in the summer I'll have the cutter bees.
Right.
So those are solitary bees that have a much smaller radius, flight radius.
It is known. There's literature out there that implicates the fact that the bees, local native bee population and bumblebees would much more be affected because the radius of their forage is much closer and closer to the area of treatment. Of course, the treatment area is localized, so only those bees in that localized area will be affected. So, of course, after the pesticide wears off, those native bees from other areas could move into your area and repopulate. But of course, these native bees, especially I think Xerces Society has done some study about this. They also nest inside the ground where the pesticide has been treated. So it has been implicated that
That's
pesticide
some of
might
them.
affect the one thing. Yeah, that gets into the ground boring bees.
Yeah, some of them are the ground nesters, the green sweat
Yeah,
bees
ground
and such.
nester, right? And that's right. Those get affected more than honeybees.
Yes, and
That's
the
what they
Xerces
say.
is encouraging people to help the native bees because they're really being
Yeah.
hit hard with the
Right.
environmental toxins.
Yeah, right. Well, of course, you know, imidacloprid is such a great insecticide that, and the mammalian toxicity is so low that, and you know, it's being spread all over the place. It's not just a issue. It's a it's a problem for invertebrates in general if it gets spread too much. But of course,
Yeah, I know
what CDFA
you get a lot. We've been very excited about that.
right. Yeah, it's only a spot treatment around one tree only. So it's very unlikely that it's going to go out any further than beyond the footprint of the tree. So unless those bees are underneath the tree, I think it will very unlikely be affected by imidacloprid.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a couple more comments/questions online. I'm going to go ahead and read all three of them. Two of them are really comments. One is USDA whistleblowers have also reported millions of dead bees after spraying, and it says CEER group. The other comment says Dr. Lundgren found that half the allowing dose you have 100% death in butterflies. Unfortunately, I don't know what specific product that refers to. And the real question really is it brought back to the hive?
Mistake has been done before in Europe, in some of the Midwest country where this happened when neonicotinoid treated seed is buried under a ground using a machine that puts up a lot of dust up into the air. And unfortunately, some of the bees from the beehives are flying through this dust, and they experience very high concentration, usually a very high concentration that it is unexpected during treatment, like what CDFA is doing, at very much higher concentration, and it kills the entire colony. Well, if you change the seeding practice, the way the seed is put into the ground by the farmers by using a machine that does not produce so much dust, this doesn't happen. So this kind of study has been done and has been proven. If the seed during planting is done according to much more advanced method of putting the seed into the ground without all these dust being produced at very high concentration of imidacloprid, this shouldn't happen. And this is not the kind of thing that's happening during CDFA treatment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. I think that there's confusion, I think, on what is a neonicotinoid. There's multiple active ingredients that are classed under the neonicotinoids.
Yes.
Like you said, that the type of application, Dr. Aya, you know, is it a seed treatment? Is it a foliar spray?
No. The imidacloprid, or the material merit that CDFA is using, is diluted in water and is treated at the base of the tree. So when it's treated at the base of the tree, it goes down to the ground for about like a meter or so, and it gets actively taken up by the root of the tree. It's not like seed treatment. It's not like very high concentration that used for seed treatment at all. It's very dilute, and it's done according to the label. according to the label for the merit product. Farmers use much higher concentration of pesticide than what CDFA is using. That's why especially when they treat the field, and if they don't do it right, the insects get affected.
Right. This is Victoria, Brian, and I was just corresponding with the person asking the questions, and I said exactly that CDFA does not use farm use products. We use products that are registered for use on a homeowner property. It looks like now we have a question about pyrethrins, and it says, you said pyrethrins come from a flower. It is a chemical from a flower that is mass produced. You make it sound like it's made from a flower.
Okay. Pyrethroids are chemically synthesized material from pyrethrin that resembles the structure of pyrethrin. Pyrethrin is actually a natural product from a chrysanthemum flower. If you ever heard of mosquito coil, that is the original mosquito coil was produced by crushing the chrysanthemum flower and burning it to knock out mosquitoes. Now the original product, pyrethrin, which is a natural product, breaks down very quickly in the environment. It doesn't last more than 2 weeks or 30 days. And you could buy this product also. It's called Pyganic, and that's a natural pyrethrin product. Now the cyfluthrin is a pyrethroid, so it's a chemical that resembles the structure, the pyrethrin, the natural product, but it's made so that it lasts a bit longer in the environment, so it's more efficacious than pyrethrin. So in other words, it has chlorines and stuff like that attached to the side chain of the chemical to make it last a little bit longer in the environment, because if it doesn't last long enough in the environment, its efficacy is just too low. So there's a difference between pyrethrin, which is a natural product from chrysanthemum flower, and pyrethroid, which is a chemically synthesized material resembling the structure of pyrethrin. And cyfluthrin is one of the pyrethroids.
Thank you, Dr. Aya. I just wanted to give Dave Kim a minute to kind of talk about what DPR does with in the registration process, and then if we've got a few minutes, I just wanted Daniel, if he's still on, from Riverside County. It doesn't look like he's on. Dave, if you want to give a little bit of an explanation of what you guys do at DPR with registering pesticides.
With registering it? I'm not really the registration person, but just like how we go through registering a product. Is that what you want? Or?
Well, yeah, I mean, to register a pesticide in California, it has to go through two sets of processes. First, it goes through a federal process
right.
at EPA, and then it comes to CDPR, where it goes through a subsequent process where at CDPR we actually have additional data that's requested,
right.
including environmental state. Yeah.
And we want it in California conditions and stuff like that, and for all the products. Well, and these products have been registered for a very long time in California, and so they've gone through all that process a long time ago. But I did want to say when Brian was talking earlier about the pesticide in the tree, like we've done fruit sampling, and it was always very, very low. I mean, it was about more than 1,000 times lower in the fruit than the tree in the leaves. So that's why we originally did a lot of fruit sampling, because we got data back from the leaf concentration, which was much higher than what's allowed in fruit. And so on any pesticide that is registered, there's a tolerance level, which is what is allowed on that fruit when you harvest it. And both these products, you know, as soon as you treat it, they're below that level. So they're still below that level. So you could harvest it right away. You don't have other pesticides that, you know, have higher tolerance levels. You know, you might have to wait a week or two before you could harvest it after you apply it. But with both the products that we're using for the citrus, they're 0-day pre-harvest intervals.
So Dave, Kim, and DPR do environmental monitoring. That's what Dave is referring to. Whenever CDFA goes into a new area, we take
we take air samples and we'll take some leaf samples, soil samples, sometimes fruit if there's ripe fruit, and that's one thing. Yeah, Brian was saying about how the chemical doesn't really drift, and we have run air samplers. We've never detected any. We'll set up a air sampler in the backyard. We'll run it, you know, from the day before the application, and then during the application, we'll do another sample, and then after the application, see if anything, you know, like off gases off, and we've never detected any of the cycluthren or the imidacloprid in those samples, just because they're not volatile chemicals. So we don't really expect to. And the way they spray it, it's not a fine mist, so it doesn't float around. It's not like they're fogging the trees. They're more like watering the trees. You know?
So Dave and Brian, this is Victoria again. We have one final question we have time for, and that is, well, it's more of a statement, but maybe you guys can respond. It's that these chemicals are highly concentrated and not found in nature.
Well, at the concentration that CDFA uses, it's not very high concentration. It's done according to the label, and at the label concentration that CDFA uses, it's very unlikely that there will be any health effects associated with the application that is done by CDFA. I think if you buy the same products from hardware store and apply it yourself, I think you would probably being exposed to much higher concentration than you would normally be exposed to from CDFA application. In fact, I usually go to the hardware store and buy these products myself, and I have aphids in my roses, so I just use a spray on that includes both cycluthren and imidacloprid, and spray it on my rose bushes because I just get too much aphids on them.
Yeah, the concentrations are very. I mean, the cyfluthrin is 0.002%, so that's lower than anything that you would buy in a store, you know. And the merit, the imidacloprid is at 0.0226%, and so that's, you know, they're very, very dilute solution.
Right, and I just wanted to reassure everyone that we are not using industrial or ag chemicals that you would find on a farm. We're using chemicals that are formulated for use on residential properties because that is, you know, the law in California. You have to use the appropriate label for the appropriate use pattern. So, and we do follow the labels. The label is the law, and you know, our staff are trained, and we'll be doing everything they, you know, if you ask them to tarp playground equipment or other gardens or anything else in your yard, they will tarp. They're very, very careful. But with that, it looks like I think we were at our time. I want to appreciate now and thank everyone for participating, and thank Paul and Alex for presenting, and Brian and Dave for being on to answer questions. So everybody have a wonderful evening, and please stay safe.